but I'm just on Twitter, and everybody's talking about this Harrison Butker commencement speech he gave at Benedictine College, and I'd seen a bunch of clips. It wasn't until last night I actually watched the whole 20 minutes, and I was watching it. And I was kind of laughing. I remember Jim Gaffigan had a stand up years ago where he was joking about how a lot of people in his family that are Catholic are kind of Catholic, but they're not really Catholic. Like, you know, I guess you're not supposed to eat meat on whatever unless I forget. But then he had another line. He was like, but then somebody in my family is really Catholic. She's like a Shiite Catholic. And it was a great line. And I just thought of that. I'm like, this dude's really Catholic, right? I mean, he's really, really Catholic. He's a Shiite Catholic, to quote Jim Gaffigan. And he's speaking at this school where I watched the thing, and they seem to have a good response to him at the school when he was there. Social media blew up. I have a million thoughts on this, but I'll throw it to you first to get your take on what Harrison Butker said in the response.
Well, as someone who grew up Catholic, went to Catholic school through 6th grade, was an altar boy, I can tell you're absolutely right. There are a lot of, we always call them cafeteria Catholics. You know, you're like, you're at the cafeteria, you pick what you want on your plate and you just kind of discard what you don't. And clearly Harrison Butker is not that, which to some, look, I'm one of these people, I'm not particularly religious, but if you're going to be religious and you're going to subscribe to a particular religion, I do think it is kind of weird to be like, well, I'm only going to go and follow the tenets of that religion that I agree with, and I'm just going to discard the rest. Like, you're free to do that, but it's a little bit hypocritical. It's like kind of religion's kind of like, take it or leave it. You're either a Catholic or you're not. And you don't have to be, but if you want to be, and he is. And so I have no problem with him, especially with that audience of a Catholic school, saying whatever he wants to say. God bless America. If he thinks those are the right, prescriptions for what ails America and happiness, because there is an issue with happiness for a lot of people in modern day America. And if that's his prescription and he wants to shout it from the rooftops, especially at a Catholic school, by all means, it's a free country. Now, in terms of the content of what he said, do I agree with most of it? No. And my main disagreement is kind of with the tenor, which is basically, and look, basically what he's saying is women in the audience should have children and put that ahead of their career, and that should be their main focus in life. Well, that's a hell of a thing for you to say. Maybe we should, I don't know, let the women and decide that. And when women get to decide in modern societies, they choose to have fewer and fewer children by and large. And I think there are many reasons for that. And we can talk about, some of those reasons. But Harrison Butker was basically saying, well, you're just wrong. Women making that choice are just wrong, and they should just have more babies and they'd be happier. Well, maybe some would. Maybe there are some women who are childless who would. But I think for many women, they're intentionally making this choice in order to live the life that they want to live. And so I think it's kind of strange for a man to be like, well, you need to have children. That's the key for your happiness.
Yeah. And by the way, so Harrison Butker, the kicker, very good kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. So I'm kind of with you that I didn't really agree with a ton of it. I agreed with some of it. It's okay that he said it. I think part of it to me is also just some of these women, especially who are just graduating and they're excited on the day they freaking graduate. You're kind of shitting on them like right on their day. You can't even wait. Can't even wait a month after their graduation. So I do think some of it was taken out of context. And by the way, my mom worked. She was a registered nurse. She had 4 kids. My wife works. She's a great mom. She is a great person out there in the workforce. And I will say this. So Harrison Butker basically says, it wasn't until his wife became a wife and a mom that she really reached. He kept using the word vocation. If you watch, her true vocation. And the way he said it, I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, I would venture to guess that although many of you women, and I think he said, I've been told a diabolical lie. I always love the word diabolical, but he said, I would venture to guess that you are more excited about becoming a wife and a mother. And I think that's fair. And I was thinking about this from a man's perspective, and while I'm out of town, I'm listening to all these podcasts as I'm on the plane. And Bill Burr, who I love, Bill Burr, almost every time he talks, I just agree with him. And it's funny because he had a conversation with Bill Maher, who's very anti-kid, if you know, and doesn't have kids. And he's like, kids are just, ah. So it was kind of a good precursor to me getting into the thought of the Harrison Butker speech. But Bill Burr said something. He goes, because Bill Maher's saying, you've sold out stadiums, blah, blah, blah. You're one of the most successful comics of all time. And Bill Burr said, and I believe he meant this. He's like, but none of that holds a candle to me teaching my daughter how to ride a bike, to holding the bike and shoving her off and watching her finally stay up on the bike. And by the way, I just did that with my daughter like 3 months ago, whatever. And it was an amazing moment. And the reason I bring all this up is so much of this was focused on women, and I get it. But don't you think men think the same way? Like, you have a kid, I have 2 kids. Now I know like the stereotype is men, we're in the workforce, we're the breadwinners, blah blah blah. Women are the homemakers, but I think most men would also tell you that they get more joy from watching their kid hit a home run or read a book for the first time, whatever it is, ride a bike, right? I mean, aren't guys the same way? Like, don't get me wrong. I love trying to be successful. And if one of these podcasts and if another video gets 1,000,000 views or 500,000, I'm super excited about it. But I agree with Bill Burr that like it doesn't, for men or women, it doesn't hold a candle to those great moments with your kids. So I do think some of it was blown out of proportion, but it did sound like, hey, you shouldn't work, right? You should just
Mhm.
have kids. And here's the other part. You know this. Some women can't have kids, first and foremost. And some women don't want kids. And I think kids are the best thing that ever happened to somebody's life. But you know what? This is a free country. If some woman or guy or couple don't want kids, hey, it's a free country. Now, maybe down the line they will say, man, I missed out. But there's women that are really smart and they like to work. You know what I'm saying? They draw a purpose through work. I had a buddy years ago, and again, this is anecdotal, because I know a lot of women who were happier once they stopped working. But I have a buddy that got divorced, Eric, and he told me, he goes, honestly, I really think things changed when she stopped working on a negative side, because he felt she needed more of a purpose beyond just being a mother and a wife. You know, and again, there's nothing wrong with that. What I'm saying is he felt like once she stopped working, she didn't have that every morning reason to like get up and do something beyond her kids, right? And this is anecdotal. I guess my point is everybody's different, Harrison Butker. So you can't just put everybody in one bucket. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that was one of the problems, and the other one was the way that he talked about these strictly defined gender roles. Because although I disagreed with some of the things he said, I do agree with him in the overall sentiment that for many people, having children is a wonderful thing, and that some people who don't have children would be better off if they did. I think that's true. And I think what happens is you have a group of people who decide that they just do not want to have children. I know, I've spoken with them. They just know, hey, it's not for me. I made that choice. I don't want to do it. And other people can't wait to have kids and they want to have as many as they can. But then there's a large group in the middle. And I think if he were to tailor his message a different way, maybe you say, first of all, you say, look, for those of you who think you may want to have children, don't become so focused on your career throughout your life that you don't allow yourself the time and space to make the decisions and the sacrifices necessary to have children, because there are sacrifices. It's very My wife and I have this situation with ourselves. We have found and our son has special needs. He has autism. It's a little bit different, but we have found over the years it's just extremely hard for both of us to have a full-time career and take care of him the way he needs to be taken care of. There are sacrifices that need to be made. During COVID, I stayed home with him to homeschool. I recently gave up my full-time position. I'm now part-time because he's having some behavioral problems at school. So in order to help him there. And I just think that those are the kind of things that the trade-offs you need to make. So if he would have talked about that, I think it would have been good. And then the other thing is what you'd said, the gender roles. Stop focusing so much. This isn't 1950 on the women that have to have this, to make this decision, as if they make it in a vacuum. It's people. It's men and women together. It's couples. They have to make this decision. And sometimes that means the man is the person who stays home, or they alternate who stays home, or both of them work and they have daycare. Like the idea that it has to be this way, where the woman has to get married and then have kids and then be the homemaker, and only before and after before her children are born or after they're 18 can she be in the workforce. It's just such a old fashioned is even not strong enough of a word of looking at how society functions. It has been an incredible revolution. Like if you go back in the not too distant past, single women couldn't get credit cards. They couldn't get bank loans. I mean, how crazy is that? Like they literally could not get a credit card. That is insane. That's like in the lifetime of our parents. That was a blink of an eye ago. Women couldn't do certain professions. There were almost no women at medical schools, at law schools. Now, half of the medical school and law school graduating class, more than half, are women. I mean, that has happened in essentially 2 generations. That is and it's a great thing, by the way. I'm glad this has happened, but it has created this huge upheaval in society. And I think what Harrison Butker speaks to is kind of reaction against that, rather than saying, hey, this is clearly what women want. Because when they were given access to these professions, they chose them. They decided that is what they wanted. So this is where we are now. Let's talk about how we can work together now to also try to find the balance between careers for men and women and families. That to me is a worthy discussion to have. And if he would have framed it in that way, I would have been all for it, because I think we do have an issue where people aren't clear about the trade-offs between career and children. And there are trade-offs. It's very rare do you get everything in life perfect, right? You always have to give up something. And that's a great discussion to have, because we've seen in the United States and in pretty much every other developed country, we've seen plummeting birth rates, people deciding that they just don't want to have more kids. And on an individual level, I think that's fine. People should have as many or as few kids as they want. But on societal levels, it does create some problems when you have an aging population and you have fewer and fewer younger people and workers to help support them. It creates some problems in your society. And so I think we should be talking about these things, but we shouldn't be framing them as if it's all on the woman. She needs to be the homemaker. She needs to raise the babies, and the man it's just such an antiquated way to look at what is a real, I don't know if problem is the right word, but a real issue that we're facing in modern societies. Let's deal with that issue. And oh, by the way, another thing we should probably talk about is, if you really care about families and children and you want to support families having more children, government policy plays some role in that. How about we do things like allow more parental leave? We give more support for early childcare. We help families and encourage them, because one of the reasons people don't have children is because of financial reasons. Let's be honest, it's expensive to have kids today. Sometimes it does necessitate one of the parents giving up their career. And again, if you're talking about the trade-offs and balancing those things, that's something to consider too. But often conservatives, people like Butker, don't mention that part of it. And I think if you're going to have that discussion, let's have it, but let's have it in a broad way, not in the narrow way of, well, we just have to act like, this is the 1950s again and all our problems will be solved.
Right. And that's where I agree with you. If it was more about, hey, if you want to work, that's cool. If you don't want to work, that's fine. But you can work if you want and figure out a way to raise kids together. That is possible. It's done all the time. But I will say, and this becomes kind of a straw man type deal, but what I've seen on social media and the reaction, this is something that I agree with the conservatives. If you're taking it from this angle, I will say, and we joke around, we use the term boss babe and all that. But if you do get to age 40 and you have devoted, let's say, just 20 years nonstop to your career. And then you get to 40 and you feel like you've missed the boat on kids because you've been so devoted to your career. I understand and even agree with some of that argument that, hey, take the time to think about when you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, what is your life going to look like? And maybe down the road, you may see, oh, my friends, they all have kids. Oh, I'm 60, 70, my friends have grandkids. So I actually agree with that part. But to act like, come on, this is 2024. Like, again, my mom is 70 years old and she raised 4 kids and she was a registered nurse working 3 12-hour shifts. And she was working what, 40, 45, 50 years ago. So clearly it can be done. It can be done that women can work, they can raise kids, they can do both. My thing again is just do whatever you want. Don't try to throw your beliefs on me or other people. I don't try to do that to other people. So I get it. I also think like he knew he was being recorded, right? But it was also that was the room for his message. You know what I'm saying? Like nothing is local anymore. Everything's national with social media. But that was, you were talking earlier about narrow messaging. Like that kind of was the message for that room. You know what I'm saying? For the most part. But then obviously it blows up to the whole world.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. He was preaching to the, the choir, so to speak, but I think there's an underlying message of truth in what he said in terms of the benefits of having children, which are real and should be talked about more. But putting it through the prism of it has to be, this way where the man works and the woman stays home and raises the children. Just I think that just rubs a lot of not just women, I think it just rubs a lot of people the wrong way in 2024. Like, what are you talking about? Do you know? Look at the success that women have had in the workforce and how they have really come to dominate some professions that they used to not even be allowed into. Like, we are all so much better off because of the contributions these women had made. But again, I think the message should have been, hey, go kill it, have a great career, men or woman, do what you want to do, work hard, but no matter if you're male or female, think about the benefits of family and make decisions along the way if you want that or you think you want that that could help you find the balance between both. And that I think is the key. And by the way, you know, men need to step up too. I think a lot of the reason it is kind of interesting because this demographic birth collapse we're seeing, the birth rate collapse in modern societies, is pretty much universal in advanced nations. And I was mentioning earlier support for children and having more government support. I think that can help on the margins, but that's not going to be the big. But if you're liberals who are talking about that as if it would like solve the issue, it's not going to. And the evidence to that is Europe. There are some European countries that have incredible benefits for new parents, like things that we couldn't even dream of in America. And their birth rates are as low or lower than ours. So it's not as if that is a silver bullet. It really comes down to people are making this decision in different cultures, in different societies where women have gotten more rights. As women get more rights and are able to do more things and are more successful, they choose to have fewer children. That is a worldwide phenomenon. And I think part of it is they look around and see what their moms did and their grandmothers, and they're like, no, thanks. I don't want all that. I don't want all of that responsibility. I want the man, if I'm going to have children, I want the man to do more, to help out, to be more of a presence, in the home, to not be the 1950s dad kind of stereotype. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And so I think it would have been nice if Harrison Butker would have also pointed out, hey, it's not just women here. Let's talk about the men and their role in all of this as well.
Yeah, all my references are to like stand-up comedians or movies, but as you were talking, I was thinking again of and this speaks to both men and women in the workforce. There's that scene in Good Will Hunting where Will and his friends, all they care about is drinking and fighting, right? And then so Sean, the Robin Williams character, is having the conversation with the math guy who's the nerd guy. And the conversation is like, well, what if Albert Einstein or pick any great person who achieved greatness in life? What if Albert Einstein, instead of going and figuring out the world, just wanted to drink with his buddies and fight at the bar, right? The whole world would lose out. And I'm thinking, and this goes for men and women. There are some men, women, there are some women, female doctors out there that are doing things that are amazing, right? And hopefully they can be mothers too. But there are some women who are so talented in many ways that the world would lose out on things if they're not
Yeah.
able to choose their vocation, which Harrison Butker doesn't just have to be homemaker.
Yeah, think about how much we lost for so long by not allowing women into these professions. I mean, think about how many discoveries in all kinds of fields weren't made or were made later. Think about the evolution of, I don't know, something like politics. How would our politics have been different if we would have had some female perspective over all the, centuries, not just in America, but in other industrialized countries? That would have been, interesting as well. So I think to just to put, I think religious conservatives, when they start talking about stereotypical gender roles like this, I think that's why you saw the big reaction against what Butker said. It wasn't even about the references he made about COVID or about gay people or about trans people. It was that got the big outrage. It was when you start stereotyping people into gender roles in this modern age. I think it just is like nails on the chalkboard for so many people, because we have seen how so many of those gender roles and the way that we held women back were just had no basis in reality, right? It was women weren't not going to law school because they didn't want to be lawyers. They weren't going to medical school because they didn't want to be doctors. That's clear as day. Take a look now. Again, as I said, more than half the people in medical school and law school now are women.